All right, let's narrow this down to something a lot of dads feel, but don't always say out loud. And that's sometimes we start parenting for our child's approval instead of their growth. And it doesn't come from laziness or not caring. It comes from love, mixed with guilt, time limits, distance, or just a desire to keep peace when you finally get to be together. You want the time to be good. You don't want arguing to take over the few hours you do have. You don't want them counting the minutes until they leave. You don't want to be the parent they associate with rules and lectures. So without realizing it, your goal shifts. And instead of thinking, what does my child need from me? You start thinking, how do I keep them happy while they're here? That's the moment approval quietly becomes the driver. And approval changes your decisions. You hesitate before saying no. You shorten conversations that matter. You ignore small behaviors because you don't want the tension. You give a little extra just to keep the mood good. It works in the short term. They smile, they stay relaxed. The visits feel smooth. But underneath that smoothness, something important starts slipping, and that's clarity. Kids don't just learn from what you say, they learn from what you consistently allow. If your boundaries depend on their reaction, they never really know where the boundary is. One time the answer is no, next time is yes because they were disappointed, and then another time you avoid the topic entirely. From their perspective, it doesn't feel like kindness. It feels unpredictable. And unpredictable parenting creates anxious kids, not secure ones. And here's the hard truth. Children don't measure love by how often you make them happy. They measure it by how steady you are. Approval-driven parenting makes you emotionally reactive. Their frustration becomes your discomfort. Their silence becomes your anxiety. Their disappointment becomes your problem to fix. Now you're not guiding anymore. You're managing moods. Over time, your child learns something without either of you realizing it. Big reactions move dad. Disappointment changes decisions, and pushing works. And that's not manipulation. That's adaptation. Kids naturally test what works. But when approval is the goal, you slowly hand them leadership of the relationship. You start negotiating things that shouldn't be negotiable. You explain basic expectations over and over and over, and you avoid accountability conversations because you don't want distance between you. And the irony is, chasing closeness creates instability because closeness built on agreement isn't secure, it's conditional. Real security comes from knowing the relationship doesn't change when emotions do. Another effect of approval-based parenting is emotional pressure on you and on them. You feel responsible for keeping the connection positive at all times. They feel uncomfortable expressing frustration honestly because they sense you need things to stay good. So both of you start protecting the moment instead of growing in it. Parenting isn't supposed to feel like hosting. You're not there to maintain a pleasant atmosphere. You're there to build a reliable relationship. And reliability requires limits. A child may not enjoy limits in real time, but they relax because of them. They stop guessing where the line is. They stop testing constantly. They stop wondering who's in charge. Approval feels warm in the moment. Consistency feels safe in the long run. One of the biggest shifts a dad can make is accepting this. Your child's temporary disappointment does not equal damage to your relationship. Silence isn't rejection. Frustration isn't disconnection. And anger isn't the end of trust. Often, it's the beginning of respect. Because respect grows when a child realizes your decisions don't depend on their reaction. They depend on your care for their future. When you stop chasing approval, your tone changes. You explain once instead of repeatedly. You hold the line calmly instead of emotionally. You stay present instead of trying to repair every uncomfortable moment. And slowly, something powerful happens. They may argue less, not because they agree, but because the structure feels stable. They may talk more because they trust your reactions. They may test less because the boundary doesn't move. Approval asks, are we good right now? Parenting asks, will they be good later? Those two questions don't always lead to the same choice. Your child doesn't need you to protect them from frustration. They need you to protect them from confusion. They don't need constant agreement. They need predictable guidance. You won't always be liked in the moment, but when they know your love isn't dependent on their mood and your standards aren't dependent on their approval, they stop worrying about controlling the relationship. and then they can just be a kid. And that's when trust actually grows because they're not trying to manage you anymore. They're learning from you.